I think we are ready to start. Thank you to everyone who is joining us. For anybody that will join us later, if they miss the very beginning, I think they'll be all right because it's going to be live on our CannaCareers page. We'll provide you guys with the link to that after this is all said and done. But like I said, welcome. We are hosting our very first Canna session module. These modules are designed by expert speakers to help introduce you guys to the breadth of different available job options within the cannabis industry and what those different job options will entail, the specifics that you'll need to know to get in, like transferable skills and how you can prepare for getting that job and more. So this is our first session, which is titled Working in Compliance. So obviously the focus of today's session will be in compliance. Ashley, are we ready to go to the next slide? Wonderful. Okay, so we are women of color in cannabis. My name is Sammy. It's nice to meet everybody. I know I don't usually act as the face of woke. That's normally something that Lo does for us, but I'm happy to introduce our wonderful group today. Women of Color in Cannabis is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are here to create safe spaces for not just women of color, but for all of us, for all of those of us who are disenfranchised and who feel like the cannabis space is not necessarily making room or seats for us at the table. So we're making our own. Women of Color in Cannabis was started by Shaloma Wagstaff and Patricia Wright, who are joining us on this call. I don't know if you guys want to say hello.
Hey everyone, I'm Lo. Thank you for joining us, giving us your Saturday. We're so excited to have you guys learn from Ashley and Dionne today, and thank you for supporting our mission.
Hi, I'm Pat. Thank you everyone for joining us. I want to thank you, Sammy, for taking the lead on this today. Enjoy everyone, and I hope you learn a lot.
Thank you, Lo and Pat, for introducing yourselves. Lo and Pat have been doing amazing work with Woke for years. This has been their brainchild, their baby, and something that they have been investing a ton of sweat equity, their blood, their tears, their time, their expertise in. And hopefully we can continue to provide resources and a safe space for those of us who are interested in participating in the cannabis industry. We are also, of course, here to introduce CannaCareers, being that this is the first module for our CannaCareers program, which is a joint collaboration between Women of Color in Cannabis and THC Staffing, Quality Control Analytics, and Joint Venturing Company. These folks are also established companies in the cannabis industry, and they have been helping us build out this program since early 2020, essentially. In early 2020, we got together as Woke and decided that we wanted to provide professional development resources to those who wanted to maximize the free time that, well, all of us found ourselves with in light of the global pandemic. So we were able to connect with these trusted women-owned businesses to create this program, CannaCareers, which has previously been unseen in the cannabis industry. CannaCareers is a one-stop shop for personal development, job sourcing, and a place to learn industry skills that have been vetted and tested to ensure there are safe environments for BIPOC folks interested in participating in the cannabis industry. Awesome. So next up, I'm going to be introducing our two speakers. Our first speaker is Ashley Boucher, from the founder of Quality Control Analytics. Ashley, would you like to say hi and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Ashley Boucher. Like Sammy so nicely introduced, I am the founder of Quality Control Analytics. Quality Control Analytics is was the first accredited responsible vendor trainer in the state of Massachusetts. All agents that work in the cannabis industry in Massachusetts are required to take an accredited responsible vendor training program. And so I provide that education to the cannabis industry. I've successfully trained thousands of agents over the state of Massachusetts. And I'm so excited to be here and to talk about compliance with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashley. Our other speaker is Dionne Carroll, who is an engineer for Higher Yields Consulting. Dionne, do you want to give us a little bit of background on yourself?
For sure. Hi, folks. I'm Dionne Carroll. I'm a multidisciplinary engineer, and these days I support the cannabis industry with Higher Yields Consulting on their design and build side. I have a background in design and product lifecycle management, where I focus on cannabis as well as other industries, supporting them in process, product, and facility design and optimization. I'm just really excited to be here and speak with you folks today and present alongside with Ashley.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you for that, for those introductions. And I think we can get started. Ashley, if you are ready. Wonderful. So we're going to be covering these following topics today. These are all about the compliance sector of the industry. So we're going to identify possible career opportunities, learn about the description and duties for each of those careers, and the qualifications that you will need in order to start a career in cannabis compliance. And with that, ladies, I will let you take that away.
Thank you, Sammy. So cannabis compliance. So we're going to highlight a few of the top jobs that are available in the cannabis industry, particularly in compliance. Some of those top jobs, starting from entry level, include inventory specialist, compliance associate, compliance manager, and director of compliance. The general expectations, number one, you must be 21 years of age or older. In the industry, all agents working in cannabis must be 21. There's no real workaround around that. You must also submit to a background check. Those regulations might be different depending on where you are located. And if you have any record, don't worry. There are states that do allow certain previous convictions, and you can still enter into the industry. And there are also some expungement services depending on your record. Typically, you're going to be working with different types of packages. You might have to lift heavy items. Now, not so much sometimes in compliance, but if you are an inventory specialist or if you're working in some of those entry-level positions, you might need to have to lift that. So I like everyone to be aware of some of the physical demands that might come with working in the industry. And you might also have to be able to bend, stand, or sit for extended periods of time. Compliance, if you are not always on the floor in inventory, you might be sitting at a computer and entering data where you might be sitting for a long period of time. Before I move forward, Dionne, do you want to add anything to that?
Just to get your mind kind of thinking about a relative experience when talking about these general expectations, you may see some of these other similar expectations in, warehouses, back-end retail environments, where when you're preparing your resume or getting ready for your interview. So just keep your mind in that type of frame set.
Okay, inventory specialist duties. Maintaining accurate records. There's a lot in the industry. Everything is tracked. You think about all of the different plants and all of the products. It's highly regulated, and you have to ensure that there are accurate records for everything in the industry, every plant and every product. You might have to assist the delivery drivers with incoming and outgoing inventory. If you are transferring any products in or out of any establishment, you have to account for that. In Massachusetts, agents may also have to be on record on video camera when they're accepting any incoming inventory from a delivery driver for another establishment. Dionne, feel free to just pop in and say anything as you're reading the slides or you're hearing me speak.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to that, communication is definitely going to be key. So whether that be through emails, phone calls, or face-to-face, you can't necessarily be shy when it comes to potentially escalating an issue or even rejecting one of those packages that come in. I think it's a great way to either implement, develop, or hone in on skills where you might have to develop or show some well-managed pushback, basically, where you're maintaining the business relationship, but upholding the standards and upholding the industry standard of integrity and quality product coming in. So you want to make sure that you are verifying everything properly, but not necessarily kicking things back to the point where you can't move the business forward.
I wanted to I wanted to mention that we have a question from one of our participants. If you are on disability, can you still work in the industry?
Yes, there are actual ADA requirements within within facilities and cannabis operations. So that's actually something to pay attention to when you are applying for positions and interviewing, just making sure that they do have the proper accommodations for you if necessary.
Yeah, and to add to that, so it's a little bit tricky if you're receiving disability benefits. I don't know the exact laws around that. And while, yes, we encourage those who identify with having a disability, if you have a disability, I personally am legally disabled. So I know the Social Security system a little bit from my prior experience. And if you are receiving any Social Security benefits, number one, you always have to report all of your working income if you are working, if you go back to work. Oftentimes it's regulated by the state, so the state actually distributes those Social Security funds. But whether or not, if federally you would be allowed to collect while also working in the industry, I would have to just do more research on that, of course, because it is federally illegal. We do get sometimes some miscommunication whether or not is it the state that's allowing it, and will the state allow you to receive those Social Security benefits, or will you be cut off federally? So I don't know the exact answer to that, but if you aren't collecting benefits and you do have a disability, I do encourage that you enter into the workforce if it's something that you want to enter into. Like Dionne was saying, we do have the ADA, so you should be treated fairly, and they should make reasonable accommodations for you as well.
Hey ladies, I had a question as well. Is there some kind of system, inventory and tracking system that is like the industry standard or most preferred? So you would recommend, hey guys, after this session, do some research on this system because we find that most dispensaries use this, or is it pretty much on a case by case that most dispensaries or large scale operations have their own internal tracking and inventory systems?
Well, from my experience, you have your state regulatory systems, and in most cases, a lot of states have signed up with metric, but there are other states that aren't necessarily strictly using metric. There's BioTrack and things of that nature. However, in addition to that, a lot of companies have a third-party system, whether that be something that they've developed in-house via some Microsoft products, or Flow Hub and some other third-party softwares out there. So it is kind of a case-by-case basis, but honestly, if you're looking for specific research or training and things of that nature, I'd say if you look at metric and softwares along those lines, and perhaps if you're able to sign up for training under that specific software, you'll be able to understand the process of the intake and processing of the packages throughout the system and better understand how they're tracking things within a whole.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I believe Anne just dropped that website, the metric site, in the chat in case anybody wanted to take a look at it. So thank you for that, Dionne.
And to just add to that, sometimes the company will look for software that keeps track of their regulated items like the cannabis products, and then the non-regulated items like pipes or lighters that they sell in the establishment. So they might have 2 different systems or one system that keeps track of both. All right, and moving on with some of the content, some of the inventory specialists, depending on where they're located, well, all of them have to keep current with the cannabis industry. Regulations change all the time. And sometimes they change very frequently, and those updates will come through metric. Sometimes agents in the industry will get updates very frequently, what's changing in the industry, but also regulations are updating sometimes yearly or every 2 years. So you really have to keep up with what are the regulations currently in the state that I'm working in. And also the education and the knowledge we have around the plant and around the products that are being sold, that's constantly updating as well. As the industry matures, we learn more information. So it's really important that you keep current with the industry, the regulations, and any updates that might come through that they're doing research or things along the lines of that. Dionne, did you want to add anything?
No, just like you said, prepare to continue to learn.
Yeah. Yep, because you'll have to keep current with the seed to sale tracking systems, ensure compliance with those applicable regulations and the standard operating procedures. If your company updates the standard operating procedures, you should be aware of any of those changes so that you can maintain compliance in the industry. And Dionne, you spoke about this earlier, but communicating, that's really important in all areas of the industry because communication is the key to success.
Absolutely.
All right, some of the qualifications. Seed to sale tracking experience would be a bonus, but if you haven't worked in the industry prior, you might not have this experience.
Actually, can I ask a question about what seed to sale means?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You take it over, Dionne.
All right, no worries. So basically, that's from the beginning stages of the plant or the intake of the cannabis product to the facility, through growing, through processing, through flower, through extract, all the way to the delivery of the product to the retail location, to the sale of that product to the customers. So basically what that system or software is doing is making sure that it's creating identification numbers that can be scanned and tracked throughout the entire process of the manufacturing of the cannabis product.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Metric would be an example of one of those seed to sale tracking systems. And if we haven't drilled it, excellent communication skills, it's so important, but you might also want to be able to perform under pressure and prioritize those activities that you're doing. If you're accepting deliveries in, you have a delivery driver that's waiting for you to accept the inventory, but you're also keeping track of other inventory or doing a monthly log of the inventory, you'll have to be able to prioritize which is more important, accepting this delivery here or continuing my work. And being able to communicate if you need assistance during some of that, if you're busy during those busy times, being able to communicate, hey, I need some help, and allowing somebody else to come in and help you during those times is also very important.
Absolutely, because you are in a manufacturing or retail environment, and if product can't move to the next stage, be it a processing stage or even the sales floor, then you're holding up the process. So being able to strategically develop and dictate your priorities is very important and essential.
I have a question from one of our participants. This may be a bit early, but are there internship opportunities where one could learn these practices? Would you just contact a vendor or a manufacturer? And if so, is there a place where general vendor manufacturing contacts are located and accessed?
That's a good question. To be honest, I don't know of any internship opportunities off of the top of my head. However, just to give you a little bit of insight, when I was looking to get into the cannabis industry, reaching out to operators and things of that nature, with some of my qualifications and asking if I could provide some value to them while still learning in some aspect was kind of how I started a few different relationships. So I would definitely recommend doing that as well, in addition to some other resources, but I'd have to go ahead and find some of those other resources.
I think that also the way that I met folks in the industry was networking. So if you are looking to contact a manufacturer or a vendor or somebody with the intent of possibly securing like an internship or like, I don't know, a work study position or something, I would try LinkedIn. There's a lot of cannabis industry groups that you can join. Women of Color in Cannabis has a group. There are a couple of other cannabis industry groups that are very, very big. That might be good places to start. You might be able to like reach out to folks that way. And just so everyone knows, we are going to go over some of the qualifications and sorry, not just qualifications, but transferable skills. If not today, we are going to be posting that information on our CannaCareers page. So we will have that for you, which is sort of a list of skills from other industries that might map on really well to cannabis industry careers.
Yeah, I've seen some internship opportunities, very few and far between. One that I was actually a part of, it was to get those who were in prison from cannabis related crimes directly into the industry. So it was, I don't exactly remember what they called it, but a jails to job type of program that did provide a paid internship. If you're, you might be able to find some of those opportunities online, but they are few and far between. Hopefully though, as the industry develops, we'll see more of those internship opportunities available. Regardless, you would have to be, well, depending on what state you're in, you might also have to be badged to actually touch the product. All states have different regulations. So you would still have to go through that badging process, depending on your state. Some of the other qualifications that you have, sorry, Dionne, did you want to add to that?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, so it's important to be able to use basic software systems. A lot of the seed to sale tracking systems that you'll be using or the inventory systems are basic software systems. So having some familiarity with being able to use things like Microsoft Office or Excel will help to, those will be nice transferable skills into using some of those other software programs. Before I move forward, Dionne, did you want to add anything to this slide?
I think we covered it all, really. Just making sure that you are able to work in that fast-paced environment and while balancing your organizational skills. Can't be missing things. Need to be slightly meticulous when it comes to all of these positions, really.
Yeah, and some of the qualifications here are items that you might want to include in a cover letter, that you're able to do, diligently record and report transactions, or you can keep diligent records, or you have that familiarity with some basic software programs. That would be great to add in a cover letter or on a resume. All right. A step up from inventory specialist might be a compliance associate. You likely would be assisting the compliance manager. And these jobs might occur in a retail environment, or it can occur in a cultivation or manufacturing facility. It's not only retail that needs heavily educated compliance individuals. but everywhere in the industry. So cultivation, manufacturing, delivery, and retail. Creating internal controls and monitoring adherence to those controls. So you want to be able to create compliance controls. That would include that you are actually doing what you're supposed to in that environment that you're in. So if you're in a cultivation facility, you'll want to have internal controls where you're monitoring temperature, humidity, you're monitoring the cleaning frequency of that cultivation facility. All of that is very important, and it's depending on where you are in the country, it might be regulated by the state that you actually have to keep all of those control documents that you're maintaining the facility as you're supposed to.
Yeah, that's definitely just good practice in any sort of process, but to maintain that documentation. But being able to develop and implement risk management processes and procedures while making sure they're being carried out, they're being evaluated as well as improved upon is extremely essential to this role. And I think it's actually a great opportunity because you're establishing these control procedures, auditing the performance, as well as identifying the risk within the system and being able to fill those gaps within an operating system and better, I suppose, better establishing the process, the business, as well as the end product being delivered.
Yeah, and I find that the compliance associate too is more aware than the compliance manager would be of like what's actually going on in the facility and are they maintaining compliance? Because the compliance associate is usually in between the inventory specialist or even the cultivators, the manufacturers, the retail agents, and that compliance manager. So they're the ones who are actually have eyes on the compliance that is occurring in the actual facility. So this is a very key role in maintaining compliance. You might also have to provide compliance training. So in Massachusetts, we have an accredited program. Not all states have that accredited program. But in addition, any accredited program is only going to provide this much information that you actually need in your establishment because it's going to be specific. So if you're creating those controls or auditing those controls, if you notice that there are any gaps, so I implement maintaining the cleanliness of the facility, that you have to clean it every 2 hours. That's just an example, just throwing out a time frame there. But if compliance is not met, you may implement a training program to help maintain that compliance in the facility because compliance is really important to maintaining the licensure. Cannabis establishments are subject to maintaining a license so that they can operate.
Absolutely. You're basically helping the business abide by the law as well as, again, producing quality and quality product with integrity. So we will probably touch on this towards the qualifications, but being able to be a change champion through that process is going to be very important to make sure that the new procedures that you may be implementing are being properly carried out within your production system.
Could we also at some point go over types of jobs in other industries that might map nicely in terms of transferable skills onto these compliance roles?
Yeah, so I was going to focus on that a little bit more towards the end, but it would be great to add that in. I can add that in now. When we're thinking about inventory specialist and even compliance associate, one of the things that comes straight to my mind is retail in alcoholic beverage shops, or even gas stations. I think about like a lot of that. Anywhere that's selling cigarettes, if you have experience working with regulated products like selling cigarettes, you have to maintain inventory and compliance because those are heavily regulated. If you're selling alcohol, that's also heavily regulated. So you're maintaining compliance by tracking all of that inventory that's coming in and being sold. Moving up, I have a medical background, so I've worked in the healthcare industry, heavily regulated. You have to follow regulations implemented on the state level and on the federal level. Dionne, I don't know if you want to touch upon that, what comes to your mind straight away?
Yeah, so on the entry level side, in addition to retail, I also think of warehouse employees as well as even some food service workers where you're considering some safety regulations in a very fast-paced environment. Then going, I suppose, a little higher level than that, considering finance as well as healthcare, and there are other industries where there may be some regulatory compliance that you interact with, such as telecommunications or even transportation. So just depending on where your previous experience comes from, there's a lot of industries that you can map your qualifications to these positions to.
Yeah, and we have some keywords a little bit later in the presentation. We'll try to, think about keywords that appear on a resume or a cover letter, and how can I use my previous experience and use those keywords to populate information in my resume and cover letter.
I had a quick question. Would you also say that maybe working in I'm blanking, it's not dispensary, the person who doles out medication, what's that person?
Pharmacy?
Yes, a pharmacy technician. Do you think there's
Absolutely.
overlap in that as well for like compliance, if someone wanted to kind of use that as their transferable experience? Do you think there's like overlay?
Definitely. In some cases, when considering medical dispensaries, in some areas they require you to have a pharmacist technician on site, and those are the only individuals that can dispense the medicine. So yeah, it's extremely overlapping.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, even home health aides. So some home health aides need to have, I don't remember the exact term for it, but they need to be certified in order to deliver medication to the patients that they are caring for. And they have to track that. They have records that they have to fill that this individual got this medication at this time. That skill is directly transferable into thinking about working in the cannabis industry, because you are doling out some heavily regulated medications. Cannabis industry, it's heavily regulated, and also you're keeping track, record keeping. You have that ability to document all of your activities. So yes, pharmacy techs and home health aides are other industries that have transferable skills.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Do you want to add anything additional here, Dionne?
I am set on the duties, I suppose, going into the into qualifications. In addition to being a change champion, yeah, having those people skills to work with managers potentially to help implement those new changes, but being deadline oriented is very important. If you're reviewing certificates of analysis, which is sometimes required for product testing, you need to be able to properly deliver the passing or failure information onto the next stage in order to make sure that your process or your product is moving throughout your process seamlessly and efficiently.
Yeah, and similar here to the last, to the previous, having that knowledge of Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. If you don't, there are YouTube tutorials. Sometimes there are even free courses that you can take to get, a certificate that you are proficient in Microsoft Word, Excel, or PowerPoint. Having that ability to use systems like that will be important. You'll be generating reports for managers, or sometimes even for state regulators, using Excel. If you don't have another database to track some of the information, you might also have to create some of those control documents using Excel. And then PowerPoint, if you're delivering any training, it might be useful to have a background. And now it doesn't have to be Microsoft, but having familiarity with other software systems that perform similar functions will be important too. And compliance managers. These are usually the individuals that I deal with most frequently when coordinating my training. Compliance managers often have a lot of duties, a lot of roles. They are often the ones who will communicate with the regulators on a more frequent basis than your compliance associate or even the director of compliance. Oftentimes, compliance managers are going to take information from the compliance associate, deliver that to regulators or to the director. They must maintain, remain current with the state regulations. They're often going to be developing a lot of the policies and procedures and those control documents. They might do that alongside with the compliance associate. And then they'll also have to help develop corrective and preventative action plans. Compliance managers are often problem solvers.
Most definitely. So a lot of times I see these people actually overseeing the issues that arise within your cultivation, production, retail facility. So actually just recently, if there was a product kickback, this individual is generally the person that has to develop the quality plan or help with assisting the implementation of it to make sure that it goes off seamlessly. Though they will more than likely be, again, working with the associates, delegating tasks to them and things of that nature. They're really overseeing a lot of those processes, kind of not necessarily from the ground floor, but a 30,000 foot view, so to speak.
Yeah. These are often, depending on where you are in the facility. So if I'm a cultivator, I might not interact with my compliance manager very frequently. Oftentimes, a compliance manager is usually working at a desk for most of their job duty is working at a desk. But down here, perform internal audits. You might see them when they're going around performing those audits. Oftentimes, the compliance associate handles that on the day-to-day. But if you're due for license renewal, you may see your compliance manager going around doing a more thorough audit or inspection, a self-inspection of that facility to really help maintain compliance. These individuals often like working at a desk. They like data, like working with data. They like working with other individuals and other departments. The compliance manager might be at the center here, and you'll have your cultivator, you'll have a cultivation manager that might directly interact with the compliance manager. A manufacturing manager directly communicating with the compliance manager. Is this compliant? Oftentimes, is this activity compliant? Am I going to, if I implement this new manufacturing strategy, is it going to be compliant with what the state regulations say? So you have to be aware of what your state regulations actually do say. If there are any updates, you might need clarity on those regulations. So oftentimes at that point, you might be interacting with a state regulator for clarity on any of the regulations so that you can directly translate state regulations to those different departments like manufacturing, cultivation, and retail. So you need to know a lot of information. Luckily, that information is readily available if you have great communication skills. So interacting with those different departments and those different state regulators.
Yeah, and I think the compliance manager is a pretty interesting position, especially because of the fact that they are working with all of the other departments. They have to be strategic in finding a balance in ensuring that the operations are abiding by regulated guidelines while still going through the process efficiently and smoothly, and making sure that that product's going through to the next stage within a timely manner.
I had a two-part question, ladies. And I'm sorry for everyone if I'm like throwing so many questions, but I'm learning with you
No,
all.
bring them on.
So the first part is, can you talk a little bit about the experience level across these positions? For example, are the hiring company looking for managers to have maybe 5+ years of experience, whereas the associate might only need to have 2 to 3 years of experience? So that's the first part of the question. And then the second part is, are there any certifications that a company may require of a manager that they may not require of an associate? So not only the time, but also any licensing that's preferential for these positions.
Yeah. Did you want to go, Dionne?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I mean, we're at that point now.
So inventory specialist and sometimes even compliance associate, those are more entry-level positions. And it's important to also think that the cannabis industry is in a transitional period where before there weren't always these strict requirements. You need, like this one for compliance manager, you need to have a minimum of 3 years. And these are just examples because it's still a developing industry and it can vary widely. You can look even in the same state, depending on what company you're applying for, these qualifications or requirements can just vary widely. So there isn't always a strict, you need to have this many years of experience or that many years of experience. And I wish I had a more straightforward answer for you. But oftentimes, so like compliance associate or inventory specialist, you might not, if you're using some of these keywords, you might not have to have this minimum experience level because it's a new industry. Where are you getting that experience from? You can use those transferable skills and some of those keywords that we'll talk about later. Manager level and director level, there may be more qualifications that are necessary. Like for compliance manager here, an example is having minimum of 3 years of experience in compliance, likely in another field if cannabis is new for you. And they may require that you have a bachelor's degree. If you have more than 3 years of experience, a bachelor's degree might not be required. It might be preferred.
Basically going to say the exact same thing. Pretty much as long as your transferable skills do align and your experience comes from, at least you're able to present your experience in a way where it fits to the qualifications and duties of the position, then I feel like you generally have a leg up. A lot of places understand that not everybody has previous cannabis experience or things of that nature. So they are looking for those transferable skills and how you're able to apply those to those positions.
Thank you. And you definitely answered my question, Ashley. That wasn't vague at all. And thank you, Dionne, for the additional context.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, the cannabis industry is still, we're growing, pun intended, right? But this is also why it's important, I think, that, women of, especially women of color, get into the industry now before a lot of these formal boundaries that usually exist start existing, right? Because there isn't a formal educational program that exists currently. There's no sort of degree that makes me qualified per se. This is the time to get grandfathered into the industry where before those formal, you have to have this many years of experience, you have to have this degree. Before those things start creating barriers to entry, if we can get in there now, and we can be grandfathered into the industry, then those barriers, they don't really matter.
That is an amazing point, Ashley. That is an amazing point.
Yeah, that's why this felt so pressing. Like, we gotta get in now. Because even though this compliance manager says bachelor's degree in related field, if you have so many years of experience in another field that is heavily regulated in regard to compliance, then they might forgo that bachelor's degree because you have the experience. So let's get in the industry now. Do you want to add anything to these qualifications, Dionne?
No, not necessarily. I suppose the one thing, yeah, they're more so looking for your experience over a piece of paper. So if you can prove the fact that, or demonstrate the fact within your resume that you align with the position, then you're a go for sure.
Yeah. And if you can see, there is a theme to these compliance positions, good technical and IT skills. You're working with software and computers a lot, you know. And if you're not familiar with sitting for long periods of time and working on the computer, it's really good to have good ergonomic practices, because your wrist, if you're typing a lot, you know, just some points to consider actually in the industry, but your wrist can get sore. I know that happens to me a lot. It's good to have take breaks, stand, stretch, give your eyes breaks from looking at the computer so frequently. You can do little eye, if you squeeze your eyes and then open them. So having those good ergonomic practices can alleviate some of the discomfort that comes with working on a computer a lot. Like the inventory specialist might not feel that same strain, because oftentimes inventory specialists and even the compliance associate, they might be moving around more frequently. They'll be on the floor more frequently, but the compliance manager is often going to be behind the desk more frequently than the inventory specialist or even a compliance associate might be.
Taking breaks, cannot stress that enough. Yeah, absolutely. Just be prepared to yeah, break up your day, because a lot of it is very important work, and you can fall into it and look at the clock and say that you've been sitting there for 4 hours. I've definitely done it myself. So just being conscious of that is very important.
Yeah. And I did want to touch upon these last two. So able to write reports, business correspondence, procedure manuals, and working independently and collaboratively. Working on making procedure manuals. So this might be working with a manufacturer, the manufacturing manager, cultivation manager, retail manager, to get those procedures in place on how they expect all of the employees in the establishment to perform those actual job duties. Because those standard operating procedures have to be written compliantly. You might be helping write those procedures, or you might be just reviewing those procedures to make sure that what was written matches the compliance regulations in that state. And that would be working, a lot of times you're working collaboratively with other managers and the director of compliance. You might also have to work independently. I do work with some compliance managers who have some duties that they are just working on by themselves. Oftentimes coordinating training, they're working on that independently. And so I try to support them that way, but most of their job duty is working collaboratively. So they're working with other managers. They're working with other employees sometimes too, to really ensure that compliance is being upheld in that establishment. The compliance is attached to the license. So compliance is vital in the industry.
Yeah, totally. It's a great position if you're looking for that variation in a work environment where you can work a little solo as well as working with groups as well, and being able to not only potentially write the technical information within the SOPs in accordance with compliant law, but also being able to dictate that in a way that the rest of your teammates can actually take in that information. So there's a lot of times we'll see things that are extremely technical, but you want to be able to develop or at least help with the development of training material that can be taken in by everybody on your team.
And with that, we'll move on. Now, once compliance manager gets boring to you, you're ready to take on the next level of your career in the industry. There may be the director of compliance. Yes, SOP is the standard operating procedure, standard operating procedure. Sorry, I saw the comment in the chat from Lo. Director of compliance. Sometimes the director might be just for that establishment. The director might also be regional. The director might also be nationwide, depending on what type of company you're working for. So if you're working for a small company, this position may not exist. If you're working for a company that has multiple locations in the state, you might be handling that whole state compliance. And if you're working regionally, you might be handling multiple state compliance. And that can be very challenging. If you like a challenge, this would be a great position. You're going to be managing multiple states, depending on the type of company you're working for. And every state has their own regulation. So those regulations vary between different states. So you'll have to be aware of those different state regulations.
Additionally, you'll need to be able to develop, evaluate, and oversee systems, software, as well as policy. So you want to be able to make sure that you're giving your team and organization the right tools to be able to carry out the audits and analysis and data collection, as well as tracking within the system.
You'll be creating a lot. So if you like to create policies, procedures, this is definitely a position that would be recommended. But we'll look at the qualifications, because unlike the other different compliance jobs we looked at, the director of compliance will likely have more qualifications attached to it. So a lot of times you'll see that a bachelor's degree is required. Master's strongly preferred. Most of the compliance directors of compliance that I work with have a bachelor's degree. Some have a master's. The directors of compliance that I tend to work with, they've come from the medical field. That's just my personal experience with working with some of the different directors of compliance for different companies. It's been small companies and also larger MSOs, but typically we see that they have some sort of medical background. That's just been the trend. Now, that's not to say that it's only that, but oftentimes for this position, in addition to having experience, a bachelor's degree is often required. Do you want to add to that, Dionne?
No, like I generally also see a lot of folks with medical backgrounds and in that position, sometimes financial as well, but medical is more so the precedent.
Yeah, and this is a higher level position. So oftentimes, because they're overseeing a lot of different groups, you might have to have, in addition to having a bachelor's degree, 5 years of experience, 5 years of supervisory experience, because you are a supervisor, and not only maintaining different employees within the compliance department, but because compliance is a whole establishment activity, you might also have to ensure that everyone in the establishment is maintaining compliance. So you're really overseeing the whole establishment and not just the compliant employees. And of course, if you have any experience in the industry, that's always a plus, but a lot of us came into the industry with, of course, no experience. So it's always a plus if you have the experience, but if you don't worry. We can use transferable skills to put some of those keywords on our resumes to make sure that we are getting noticed so that we can get into the industry. But when talking about your resume, you want to be able to write that resume for each position that you apply. So if you're applying for an inventory specialist job one day, you want to make sure that you're gearing your resume to that position. And if you're applying for a compliance associate, you want to gear your resume to that particular position. Do you want to add anything to that, Dionne?
No, just keep it in scope and keep it focused.
on those resumes, some of the key words. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so definitely compliance, kind of redundant. But going into data entry, that is extremely imperative, along with record keeping. So being able to prove that you've demonstrated experience with this is going to be important to show off to your resume as well as your interviewer. So because these are consistent processes and tasks that are going to show up within the compliance realm of cannabis and really all industries. So data entry, record keeping, that kind of goes into auditing as well, but it's just hand in hand with keeping up system integrity as well as the integrity of your operations and the products going out of it. Then, oh, go ahead.
No, you can continue.
Okay. Yeah, going into risk management, being able to touch on the fact that you've been able to identify gaps and look at gaps and risk, and as well as develop the solutions and implement the solutions for them is going to be important for carrying out these positions as well.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about some of the past experience that you might have had that would fill these different words, keywords to put on a resume for a compliance position, have you ever had to follow a procedure and you're maintaining compliance, right? So if you have a job where you have to follow a certain procedure or you're required to do a job a certain way, you're maintaining compliance by complying with that particular procedure. So I think most of us would have that compliance experience because we're following those procedures or we're taking trainings as we're supposed to. It doesn't matter what job you're working in. If I'm working at Stop and Shop, I have to maintain compliance with taking my trainings. There are certain trainings you have to take. If I'm working in the medical field, I'm maintaining compliance by performing activities that adhere to a certain procedure. So I think everyone has that compliance experience because most jobs require us to do a job a certain way. When we're thinking about data entry and record keeping, again, a lot of jobs fulfill that. Even if you're just filling out a record, right, that you're cleaning a restroom at a certain time, or if you're a driver and you have to check your vehicle, right? Before you get into the vehicle, you have to do a safety check. You're filling out a record, you're recording data, you are record keeping, you have that skill. I think most of us in all of our jobs have that requirement that we track some sort of information. So you can, using these keywords, but you also want to think about it. You want to make those connections because we don't want to just put the words on our resume. We want to be able to say, well, this is how I have that experience. I had to maintain this record, and I know how to maintain records. I know how to complete records or fill in that data. Auditing, we might not all have this experience auditing depending on what jobs that we've come from. But an audit might include if you have any supervisor experience in whatever position that you're in. Did you have to audit any records? If an employee that worked under you as a supervisor, if you had to take those records in, check those records, you're auditing someone else's work. It doesn't matter if it's at a high level or in an entry level. If you're a supervisor for what was I thinking? I just lost my train of thought. If you're a supervisor, I'll just give an example for my previous job working in medical lab. I would have to check everyone's work. And I would have like a little system that I did, but I would check to make sure that they compliantly entered all of that data. So whatever position that you're in, if you have to oversee or check someone else's work, you're auditing. Yep.
Just to add on to that, you know, in a few positions, I see folks even counting out each other's drawers, you know. So if you're in that position where you're, again, checking somebody else's work and validating their finances there, I mean, that's a very important task. And yeah, you're auditing right there.
Yes, yes, that's awesome. And you said another word, validate. So, you know, validating the cash drawer. That's, you know, those are directly transferable into compliance, because you're maintaining compliance in whatever other position you're working in. Oftentimes, I think there are a lot of industries that are heavily regulated. Can't really think of an industry that doesn't have a regulation attached to it. So I think most of us have to adhere to regulations. If you're not sure how to use that word for whatever industry you're coming from, you might want to just, you know, do a quick Google search, regulations for transportation, or regulations for, you know, selling alcohol. So there are a lot of different, I think every industry has a regulation.
Yeah. It's basically the rules and policies that the company has to abide by.
Yep. All right. And risk management. And this might, again, not be something that all of us have experience in, but if you are, again, working in an alcoholic beverage establishment, or even as a bartender, then you may have this risk management because you're adhering to some regulation that you're not selling to minors, and that you're ensuring that there is restriction into the establishment that you're working in, and you have some level of managing that level of risk. Is there, you know, how are we going to maintain compliance by alleviating any potential risk for violating our regulations? So this one might not be something we're all familiar with or all have experience in, but definitely compliance, data entry, and regulations. So you can cross-link those words, those keywords, onto your resume, but just be thinking of how you are backing that up by your actual experience. And like your resume, you should have a cover letter that will be tailored to this prospective job that you are going for, and it's also going to use some of those keywords. You might also want to outline a specific example using those keywords.
Yeah, definitely keep it relevant to the position, as well as your qualifications and skill sets, and let them know why you fit. Yeah, why you should go in there for an interview. Sometimes, especially when talking about the cannabis industry, I'll not only talk about my qualifications, but even my passion for working within the cannabis industry. So this gives you that chance to be able to dictate why you should show up for the interview and why, yeah, you'll be great for that position.
Yeah, and I think that using that passion can differentiate you from everyone else who has the same qualifications and experience that you have. So that's a great, that is a great component. All right, and we do, so Woke has that office hours. Sammy, do you want to, as we're wrapping up, do you want to discuss that a little bit about for resume and cover letter help? You're on mute.
My bad. Sorry, guys. I was going to say I would be happy to help help you talk a little bit about Woke's CannaCareers Office Hours program. Our CannaCareers Office Hours program, brought to you by Danielle Schumacher of THC Staffing, is here to help you guys set up your resumes and cover letters. What it is a one-on-one session where you can submit your resume and you can apply essentially for one-on-one help tailoring that resume to a cannabis industry job. If you want more information on our CannaCareers office hours, please visit our webpage, which is woke.world/CannaCareers. Oh, we just had somebody who has had a session with Danielle who said it was amazing. So we have testimonials too. We are not able to have any available, we're not going to be able to have any available appointments until March. Unfortunately, we are booked through February, but the earlier you apply, the better.
Yes. Thank you for that, Sammy. And Dionne, I know that you had some information that you wanted to share about knowing your rights once you have the job. So once you've submitted your resume and you are hired, know your rights.
Yeah, so it's really important, but this can't be stressed enough, especially.
Hey, I'm so sorry, Dionne, to cut you off, and I don't mean to interject, but there was a slide that I think was very important that I can speak to if you guys don't want to, but I'd love you guys to speak on it as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The interviewing and negotiating, the research, the employer, only because I had an experience where it was. I was thankful that I researched the employer because I was able to learn about the company, what I thought, because I didn't take the job, but what I thought was the company culture, which is leading up until I feel like the next slide. So I kind of really wanted to talk about this one. Researching the employer is crucial. I know we're all really eager to enter the cannabis industry. So we may want to take the first opportunity that presents itself. But without doing your due diligence, you may walk into an environment that is hostile, that isn't friendly to Black and brown folks or, LGBTQI folks as well. So it's very important that you do that research to make sure that, yes, it's a cannabis job, but it's going to be a job that's fulfilling, that's safe to your mental health, but also your physical health as well. So I definitely think prepping yourself with that knowledge is also going to provide a better interview when you're able to ask informed questions and thoughtful questions and say, I noticed this on your website, or this program you recently launched was very interesting, or you mentioned that you were launching social equity programs. Could I hear more about that? It's going to show that you took your time to do your research, but also that you're a thorough individual who's capable of doing research. So I think it's very, very important, especially to avoid hostile work environments, to try to do as much research as you can beforehand. Thank you for letting me jump in, ladies.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Lo. Great points. Honestly, looking at reviews that you may be able to see, and honestly, take time into consideration. I wouldn't always let them I wouldn't necessarily say let it scare you away, but take that information for an informed decision. Because if you see that type of environment, you don't necessarily want to interject yourself into it. Additionally, as Lo said, being able to look at their mission statements, their values, and better understand the company and let the interviewer know that you align with those values, then I think that's going to resonate a lot more than other interviewees. So I think that is absolutely important. And another tip for interviewing, along with being prepared, giving yourself time to be prepared, so that I always say, psych yourself up, not out. Literally go tell yourself in the mirror how dope you are, how you got this, how you're amazing, because you are. You do got this. Whether you're gonna go get the position or not, you are ready for this, and you're gonna do great. So go ahead and make sure that you do that, to give yourself that time and that extra confidence.
I love that, Dionne. Psych yourself up. You are awesome. And it's also important, practice out loud with someone, maybe yourself in the mirror, but no, practice out loud with someone else is also important. Your interviewing skills, someone you trust, who can give you honest feedback. You know, I have those few people that I trust who I'm like, all right, I'm about to do this thing. Can I practice with you or can I show you? And they're not, they're going to give me feedback because they love me and they care for me and they want to see me successful. And so if they give me, you know, some good critiquing advice, then I know it's trusted, you know, and I will improve on whatever they're giving me for feedback. So it's important. All right.
I had one question, ladies. How many questions are too many questions in an interview?
It's a good question.
Yeah. I mean,
And
Danielle, do you have any feedback for us here? That's our resident HR person.
Help us out.
Because as you guys have noticed, or probably haven't, I'm a very question prone individual. And I really do thorough research before going into interview or even in meetings in general. I like to just be prepared. So I'm like, how much is too much? Should I reel it back, keep it very high level? I love to ask the question, like, what is your company culture and how do you deal with hostile work environments? And I'm like, maybe that's a little bit too pushy and aggressive. So if you can give like any extra color on that, please let me know.
I love all the questions when I'm interviewing people, but yeah, I'd like to see what Danielle has to say.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I think the first step is to write down all of your questions, like get it documented, because I would recommend prioritizing 3. I would even break it down to like, what if you only have time to ask 1 or you panic and you only ask 1? What is that one question that you want it to be? And then 3 questions if you can. And then anything more than 3 to 5, that would probably be too much in an interview, but you never know. And the point of having it written down is also so that you can follow up afterwards with any questions that didn't get covered. And it's nice to have it in front of you because as you're going through the interview, it's possible that some of your questions will get answered. And you don't want to get too flustered when they say, okay, do you have any questions? You want to already maybe have a mark of like, oh, we covered that one, you know, but also if something gets covered, and it's your like number 1 question, I would recommend still asking that and just expressing that. Say, this was my most important question and I know we covered it, but I want to add something to that. So, and all of this is kind of related to reading the room. Really be mindful of the time. I think employers, when you're in an interview, they look for that. They look to see if you paid attention to the time. And tried to tailor your answers according to like being aware of like, if you have some sense of what was their plan for how long they were going to be questioning you, and then you'll have some sense of like, oh, I think we're about halfway through, or oh, we're like kind of out of time. It's good to just remind yourself of that when you're preparing, so that in the moment, if you're not breathing enough and if you're not thinking, you know, how you normally are, then just remember, check the time, breathe. It's okay to like, you know, say, oh, I do have a lot of questions, and that's just part of how I am. I'm, because that's a good thing if you're really curious and researched a lot, but it doesn't mean you necessarily have to prove it by asking the whole list of questions. You can just, you know, it kind of explain a little bit about yourself, and maybe ask like, is it okay if I ask 1 or 2 more? And then you can kind of decide which 1 or 2 more are you going to ask. So that would be my advice.
Thank you. That was great. And that's why you are the person who will be providing and are providing our resume workshops, because you're amazing at this type of stuff. And yeah, THC staffing is amazing. So if you haven't, please sign up for our resume workshops with Danielle starting in March, because we're all booked for February. And thank you again, Danielle.
Yeah, and just to touch back about the resume, whenever I go on a job interview, I always bring a few extra copies, because sometimes depending on the job position that you're applying for, the person who has your resume might not be the one who's interviewing you. And sometimes you're interviewed by a group of individuals, or you might see multiple individuals and they don't all have a copy of your resume. So I just always bring a copy of my resume just in case that someone else needs a copy of it. And I always try to put it in like a nice little folder. Nothing too fancy, but I always try to put it, because presentation, to me, presentation is important, but just to put that, instead of just handing someone a piece of paper, even, just a nice little folder, just put it in there, or I'll have it, in a folder to sort of just present. So it might be important to have a couple of those. And you do at least want to have probably one question. So if you're someone who doesn't like asking questions, you do want to have at least one question to ask, because prospective employers tend to like to see that you do have questions, or that you have done a little bit of research on the company beforehand. Does anyone have anything else they would like to add about this slide?
I'm set on interviewing.
All right. So now that you've gotten the job.
All right. So now that you've gotten the job,
So
definitely.
sorry, there was one thing for the slide. Dionne, I keep doing this. That second part, negotiating. So you've been offered the job. You haven't accepted. Do you have any advice on negotiating? I remember, I'm not sure if it was Sammy, but someone mentioned that, and I find it to be true, not only with myself, but my friends, never my male friends, that women inherently have a issue negotiating. Don't know why, don't know if it's been statistically proven, but this is just what I've noticed in my life. So do you have any advice? And I know Danielle has advice because I've asked Danielle this question.
Danielle says negotiating is its own session.
But any highlights that we can do, only because it was on that slide, is that second part.
Well, I'd say, yeah, definitely researching the position and knowing the value of the position and your work going into it is definitely going to help you. And actually like setting yourself like a bottom line for things that you're not going to go below. That's something that I generally use. I've been trying to get better at my negotiating skills myself. So probably gonna have to sit through Danielle's session.
Yeah, I would have to say, honestly the same. And I think that being a woman, especially a woman of color, it's hard to go in there and say, this is what I want, and I'm not negotiating less. It's very challenging, and I think that's why Danielle says that's a session of its own, because we're fighting systemic oppression, and knowing your worth. When you're systemically oppressed, it's hard to sometimes know your worth, but we're all going to get there. We're all going to be strong negotiators. It's really hard. The last position that I had in the cannabis industry, I was actually very proud of myself, just to put that, but because I said I wanted to make this much, they came back to me with a much lower number, and I said, I went, nope. This, and I gave them a slightly higher, but it was in the middle between where I said originally and they said, and I felt, instead of just accepting whatever number they threw at me, I went back and I said, no, absolutely not. Like, I'm worth more. And so it can take a lot, because then you start, well, what if I don't get this position? But, if you don't get the position, they don't know your worth. And is that a place that you actually want to work for?
Yes,
Yeah.
Ashley, yes.
Absolutely. Also, one thing to point out, sometimes I do see companies within cannabis saying that since this is a newer industry, things of that nature, this is why you may be getting paid lower, this, that, and the third. But be also conscious that a lot of these companies are beginning to be a lot more profitable. So just keep that in mind. I wouldn't necessarily let them take that as some sort of a cop out from the organization.
Yeah, and even, now, like negotiating some of the contracts for the services I provide, it can be challenging because, it's the landscape that we're working in, but we're fighting this. And so the more women that enter into the industry, the more women of color that enter into the industry, the more people of color that enter into the industry, there's going to be no excuse for not paying us our worth. But that starts with our voices and really advocating for ourselves, and just by saying I'm not settling for less. So, and they do use that, Dionne. They're like, well, we're a new industry. We can't really afford to pay much. Well, I'm going to come in here as a chemist. I'm going to get paid my worth. So
exactly. Yeah. If you're doing the work, you should get paid for it. So we need to set that standard.
All right. Anything else about negotiating? Does anyone else want to share some advice or interesting experience with that? Danielle?
I could say something really brief because it goes back to researching and documenting. For instance, do they list a pay rate in the job description or any other job descriptions that you can find of theirs? Look at their actual website, look at LinkedIn, wherever you can find, even if it's past tense, because that's more information you'll have with you to negotiate with. And also, you can possibly ask at some point during the hiring process, as you're emailing to set up an interview, it might sometimes make sense to ask what the pay range is. A lot of companies purposefully don't list the ranges because they want to be able to see how low they can get people to go. So it's one thing that I always recommend for when I'm doing recruiting is that companies, if they really want to attract the best and widest candidate pool, to be transparent about what the range is and to be clear in the job description of, for instance, right now we have a social media manager position listed that's like, and we list an hourly range, and the range depends on how much graphic design experience you have. So there's very clear information about, if you have this experience, you'll get paid in this range. If you have this extra experience, you can negotiate higher, essentially. And also, just to wrap up, obviously don't ever go in there and say you're willing to take less. If they have a rate published, that does happen in interviews where people will feel like they need to negotiate down. So definitely don't do that. If they've told you what the minimum is, don't ever go below that or offer to go below that. And that, all of this is, in theory, actually figuring out what to say and how to present it. That goes back to, like, who do you know that you trust to help you kind of walk through what that would sound like, what your sound bites are, and maybe have your talking points literally written down if it's going to happen verbally. And then again, you can always try to negotiate an email, which is often easier and could be very effective to think of the negotiation process as in person and through email, or not always in person, but maybe video conversations or phone. Yeah.
Thank you, Danielle. I also wanted to point out that, Anne, I saw you had mentioned that negotiating is like a muscle, and I agree with you. In my experience, I've started freelancing 3 years ago, and I have been setting my own rates and essentially defending my rates for that entire time. And it does get easier the more that you practice doing it. So if you are in a position where you are negotiating and it's hard right now, or you're nervous, or you're afraid to ask for what you believe you're worth, or you're not sure if you're worth what you're asking, keep going, keep trying, keep pushing along. You can adjust your strategy as you see fit, as you get feedback from the results, but it will get easier to stand up for what you're worth the more you do it.
I was going to add, I practice with like a friend or my husband, literally walking through all the potentials of it all. So that also helps kinesthetically kind of go through, get the jitters out. for negotiations, and to expect it, just to have it as a natural part of where the conversation can go, and having that like solidified within before walking in is completely echoing what everyone has added to that. So you can always just reach out to us and we'll give you a good boost of like, you got this.
Yes, but Sammy, did you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to mention that it is now 3:35 and we are reaching the end of our session. Yeah, so let's get through the last of the slides and maybe open it up for any additional Q&A.
Yes, awesome. I know,
Okay.
yeah, I think that, talking about salary is definitely a great segue into this navigating hostile work environments, because Dionne has something really important to add about salary.
Yeah, because some policies may ask you not to talk about your compensation packages. However, that's generally not legal. So I do recommend understanding your rights and knowing the law, so that having the conversations of how much you guys are getting paid, especially being a marginalized group. Like it's fair to have these conversations, and it's fair to bring into light the fact that there may be a gap between you and other employees. So don't be afraid to understand that and be able to have those conversations, because that puts you into a better position to negotiate your salary pay rate higher when you're actually in the current position.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of companies, not just in the cannabis industry, but companies across the board say you can't talk about your pay with anyone. I remember having a friend years ago who said that they weren't allowed to talk about their pay rate, and she accidentally was talking with someone and found out she got paid significantly less than a male. And when she brought it up, she was actually reprimanded for it, and that's not legal. Why, you're doing the same position. She actually had more experience than this other individual. So being able to have those conversations, and I think I saw it in the chat, talking, what is the salary, or what are your salary expectations, because you should be fairly compensated. And I think the last statistic that I read was about women of color are paid about 34% less than men with the same level of education and experience. So it can be a significant gap. So being able to have those conversations to protect yourself is key.
Yeah, absolutely essential.
Mm-hmm. No, it's in the employee handbook. They should have an employee handbook, and if they don't, that's a red flag. That is definitely very important. That will set the roles, the expectations of all employees, and that should also tell you what to do in the event that something adverse happens in that. You should have a go-to person if something happens that is, you're in a hostile situation. It might not be the norm for that establishment, but if those things happen, no matter where you are, so you should know who to go to and what to do in that situation.
Yeah, it's totally within your best interest. And again, it allows not only you to adhere to policy, but make sure that that policy is okay, as well as the fact that the operation and the rest of the organization is adhering to said policies and dictations.
Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add to this slide?
I would say your community's here to help, and we all benefit from making sure that companies are operating within the community, are operating with integrity within the community. So feeling free to escalate that I think that's totally fine. Just keeping integrity within the industry or wherever you work, honestly.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that wraps up the presentation of the content. So we're
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ashley and Dionne, for spending all of this time walking us through compliance and what we need to know to enter into it, and also for helping give us those sort of like transferable skills. I think that's going to be really useful, especially for folks who are looking to join this burgeoning industry, since it's kind of green right now. Are there any questions maybe from our participants here in Zoom or on our social media platforms? I know that we have some folks joining us via Facebook. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no, which means that we can wrap up. Thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you to all of our partners who are helping bring CannaCareers to life. That is Ashley, of course, with Quality Control Analytics, Danielle with THC Staffing, and Anne with Joint Venturing Company. And thank you so much, Dionne and Ashley, again, for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Thanks for having me. It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Yes.
Yes,
Thank
we
you for everyone who
appreciate it.
attended. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks for the questions and the answers. Lowe's questions, Danielle's answers too.
Thank you.
Also wanted to once again redirect everyone to our CannaCareers page for more information. And if you want to refer back to this CannaCareers Module 1, it will be posted live on that site. And if you are interested in applying for office hours and to get some help on your resume, once again, you visit our page, woke.world/CannaCareers. And yeah, I think that's it on my end too. Lo, Pat, is there anything else you'd like to add before we exit?
Just thank you everyone for supporting women of color in cannabis. It means so much to us. Thank you for giving us a slice of your Saturday. We really appreciate it. We hope that this was informative to you all. It was definitely very informative to me. We will be doing these sessions once a month on the first Saturday of every month. So please join us next month, and the topic is going to be working in cultivation. So it's going to be a session very similar to this, except for the topic will be cultivation. And once again, thank you so much for all the support. If you're not following us on Instagram, please do so at _WOCC. Please sign up for our email listserv as well. And if you have any extra questions that you think of later, please visit us or send us an email, I should say, at woccnyc@gmail.com. And thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your Saturdays. And we really appreciate this. Ashley, Dionne, once again, knocked it out the park. Thank you, Sammy, for moderating. I think you did great. And yeah, thank you guys so much and have a great rest of your Saturday afternoons.
Everything that Lo said. Have a great Saturday, everyone. No, you guys are amazing.